Come on in, Bolt fam. I had to stop and hit record because there is way too much movement happening in Los Angeles right now, and this does not feel like random off-season noise. When the conversation starts turning into draft trades, an offensive line begging for help, a veteran still sitting there on the open market, and current roster names who could lose their spots, that sends a loud message. The Chargers might be setting up an aggressive pivot to protect Justin Herbert and completely change the way we read this team. If you live and breathe Chargers football every day, hit subscribe, smash that like button, and stay with me all the way through because this could shake up the entire direction of this franchise. The first thing that makes all of this even more serious is simple. The Chargers cannot walk into this draft like they have room to miss. That is a fact. They have the 22nd pick in the first round, but they are sitting on just 5 total selections after losing capital in the middle and late rounds. That is exactly why the trade down chatter has picked up so much steam. Not because the Chargers are backing off top-end talent, but because Joe Ortiz may be looking at this roster and seeing the obvious. This team needs volume, more swings, more answers at multiple positions. And when you look at the actual needs, it gets even heavier. Interior offensive line, defensive line, edge, wide receiver, corner, tight end. This is not one leak in the roof. This is the whole house creaking in the storm. If a guard like Olavavega-Ioane is there at 22, sure, that makes sense. But if the front office believes it can find a day 2 guard and stack extra picks on top of that, then the whole board starts to look different. That changes the entire picture. Now here comes the reported side mixed with the speculative side. 3 teams stand out as plausible trade partners: the Chiefs, the Patriots, and the Titans. Kansas City has enough picks to move up and grab a stronger defensive piece late in the first. New England, with all that extra draft ammo, could want to jump up 8 spots to help protect Drake May with an offensive tackle. And Tennessee, depending on what it does early, could also see value in coming back up into the end of round 1 to attack another need. None of those deals are confirmed, but the logic is real. And this time of year, when the logic is real, the smoke usually starts rising for a reason. The most interesting part is this. For the Chargers, moving down would not be backing off. It would be attacking from a different angle. It would be admitting this roster still needs density, competition, and real depth. And honestly, that fits a team that cannot keep surviving on flashes and pretty names. The Bolts need to walk out of this draft with more than one instant impact piece. If trading down opens one door, the second storyline makes it painfully clear why the urgency is there in the first place. The Chargers' offensive line still does not inspire confidence, and no, that is not just emotional fan talk. Outside evaluations are saying the same thing. Gary Davenport from Bleacher Report flat out said Los Angeles made the playoffs more in spite of its offensive line than because of it. And when you remember Justin Herbert got sacked 54 times in the regular season and then 6 more times in the wild card loss to the Patriots, it is hard to argue. This is not a tiny issue. This is the fault line running under the whole offense. The most fragile part is the interior. Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt help steady the edges when healthy, but inside there is still that unfinished construction feeling. Cole Strange arrived on a 2-year deal and knows Mike McDaniel, that much is real. But the overall read on him is not exactly inspiring. He feels more like a question mark than a real solution. And for a team that has to protect its franchise quarterback, that is just not enough. Not even close. That is where Kevin Zeitler starts to feel like a real market opportunity. We are not talking about peak Kevin Zeitler anymore, and that matters. But we are talking about a 14-year veteran with absurd durability, still respected in pass protection and still available. That changes the conversation because the Chargers also have the money to do something. According to the report, they are sitting on one of the biggest cap cushions in the league. Money is not the roadblock here. The real question is whether they want to act now or gamble on the draft fixing an emergency that may need a double answer. A veteran now, a young piece later. To me, that kind of move sends a message. Because if Joe Ortiz signs Zeitler, he is not just adding a guard. He is telling everybody Justin Herbert is not going into 2026 trapped behind an interior line built on crossed fingers and wishful thinking. And if you believe protecting Herbert is the #1 priority of this offseason, hit that like button right now, because this offensive line read could shape everything they do in the draft. At the end of the day, this is not only about one name, it is about posture. Are the Chargers going to walk into the draft hoping the board saves their line, or are they going to attack the weakness now so they can draft with freedom later? That answer could tell us everything about whether this team actually learned from what it just went through. And then the story gets even more interesting because there is a third draft angle out there that could really shake the room in Los Angeles, leaving the first round entirely. And this is not about panic, this is about opportunity. Eric Edholm of NFL.com laid out a projected scenario with the Jets as a trade partner, where the Chargers would move from 22 to 33, pick up another second-rounder, improve their fourth-round position, and add a future second. That does not confirm real talks. That matters. But as a possible blueprint, it absolutely deserves attention. Why? Because the Chargers are short on picks and long on holes. If you move down 11 spots and walk away with 2 second-round picks, suddenly you gain something this roster badly needs: breathing room. You gain flexibility to attack the offensive line, defensive line, edge, receiver, or secondary without putting the weight of the whole offseason on one first-round dart. There is another layer here too. Early on day 2, the board resets. The pressure changes. The Chargers could sleep on it, restack the board, and come back swinging with 2 punches almost back-to-back. For a roster that needs both immediate help and long-term depth, that is gold. Of course, there is risk on the other side. Walking out of the first round means passing on the chance to grab a rarer talent at 22. And if the front office has one player clearly above the rest, then playing games with that slot makes no sense. But if the gap between the player at 22 and the player at 33 is not all that dramatic, then this kind of trade could be the smart move that flips the whole offseason on its head. And when that kind of window opens, the Chargers have to decide what they want more: first-round glamour or real control of the draft. And while everybody is staring at trade scenarios, offensive line help, and draft capital, there is another storyline quietly crackling under the surface of this roster. Some veterans and established names could be heading into 2026 with their jobs hanging by a thread. And to me, that ties this whole script together. Trevor Penning is the clearest example. He got re-signed, but the framing around him says a lot. Right now, he is being paid more like a high-end backup while still sitting in the mix as a possible starter. The problem is his play has stayed wildly inconsistent. There is aggression. There is athleticism. There are flashes that make you think there is something bigger in there. But the struggles in pass protection and situational awareness still hit like potholes in the dark. And when draft names like Vega Ioane, Chase Besantis, Emmanuel Pregnon, and Cage Casey start circling as possible alternatives or upgrades, the message gets loud fast. The Chargers do not seem interested in pretending that spot is solved. Quentin Johnston sits in a different tier, but the tension feels similar. There is more uncertainty than conclusion here, and that is important. The story paints a boom or bust path for him in 2026, and honestly, that feels fair. Johnston could finally take the leap if the system plays to his strengths, but he could also lose snaps if Mike McDaniel prefers other answers and the front office decides to add another receiver. And when names like Jordan Tyson, Denzel Boston, Omar Cooper Jr., and KC Concepcion get tied to this conversation, the signal is not subtle. Young talent could walk in and apply pressure immediately. Then there is Denzel Perryman, a respected veteran, a voice in the room, a guy who matters to the culture. But the league does not care about nostalgia. At 33, with his coverage limitations becoming more visible, he is also drifting into that dangerous zone where leadership no longer guarantees snaps. If the Chargers really like linebackers such as C.J. Allen, Kyle Lewis, Anthony Hill Jr., or even a sleeper like Red Murdoch, that pecking order could change in a hurry. And here is the thread that ties this whole block back to everything else. Maybe this draft is not just about adding talent. Maybe it is about redrawing the hierarchy. Maybe it is about telling the locker room that contract, reputation, and past investment will not protect anybody anymore. That changes the energy, that raises the competition. And for a team trying to go from intriguing to truly dangerous, that kind of jolt might be exactly what this roster needs. At the end of the day, I will be straight with you. If this were my call, I would trade down in the draft and still try to patch the offensive line with a veteran before the board even starts falling. To me, this Chargers roster needs volume, competition, and above all else, it needs to stop putting Justin Herbert in a season built on improvisation and prayer. Sitting at 22 and refusing to add extra capital feels too small for a team with this many cracks. And betting that rookies alone will fix everything feels way too dangerous. So now I want to hear from Bolt fam. Are you taking the aggressive, smart path? Or are you riding with a different vision? Drop it in the comments, no filter, and subscribe if you are tracking every single move the Bolts make.